Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is about fixing the Jaguar X-type cruise not available issue. I'll show you my way of making the cruise available, getting rid of the 0172 and 0175 error codes saying the engine is running rich. Why the engine is running rich even if all the fuel and ignition components including the intake manifold gaskets are checked, replaced and in a good working condition. The matter is that the engine control unit enriches the fuel to air ratio due to the vacuum leak in the intake to compensate for the false air getting into the engine through the connections and O-rings of the intake manifold, which causes the engine misfiring and rough idling. And in today's video I'll show you the next step that will help me prevent another possible vacuum leak. That is, I'll remove, repair or replace the so-called intake manifold isolator grommets. So let's begin. First of all, I unscrewed and removed the two bolts retaining the intake manifold, so that let it rest freely in its place. One of the bolts can be found at the rear end of the engine, just under the throttle body. I unscrewed it with a 10mm L wrench. The other bolt securing the manifold to the bracket on the engine head can be found on the firewall side. I removed this bolt as well. I could just untighten these two bolts so that the manifold could just move a bit down when I installed the new grommets, but I preferred to be on the safe side to make sure that nothing prevents the manifold from being properly pressed down to where it belongs. And here I came to the most important moment I've already talked about in my video about intake manifold gaskets. I never let the manifold to be secured with short bolts only, so that not to pull the bronze inserts out of the lower plastic part of the manifold. That's why I unscrew short bolts first and long bolts second when removing the manifold, and vice versa. I install the long bolts first and tighten them, applying more power since they reach the metal part of the engine head. I am not afraid so much to strip the long bolts as to strip the bronze inserts under the short ones. So, after removing the short bolts, I proceed unscrewing the long ones. And now the manifold is resting in its place freely. To tell you the truth, it's more reasonable to check and replace the isolator grommets of the manifold bolts when changing the manifold gaskets, but I cannot tell you for sure why I omitted this point when I removed the manifold and took it to pieces last summer. So here are all the 6 bolts and the 6 grommets securing the inlet manifold of the Jaguar X-type. As time goes on, the grommets become pressed and don't keep the manifold tightly in its place. Little by little, air starts leaking through the manifold connections. The manual says that the grommets should be replaced together with the manifold gaskets. I'll show you how I made special washers and installed them together with the grommets as a temporary solution. These washers were meant to seal the engine intake until the new grommets arrive, but in fact they are working for quite a long time. The diameter of the 2 big washers are 3 cm and the 4 smaller are 2.5 cm wide. I don't urge you to do the same. You can just order new ones from some online shop and proceed to the next chapter of this video. As for installing the bolts and the grommets, I always make sure that the thicker and less worn grommets are installed on the long bolts. You know, these long bolts are the main ones securing the manifold. It remains an open question why didn't the Ford motorists make all the 6 bolts long, and why didn't they use 8 bolts for securing the manifold. There are 2 unused holes in the plastic lower part of the manifold on the bank one side. So here I go on installing the bolts securing the manifold. First I put the 3 long bolts in their place and tighten them. As I have already mentioned, the grommets of the long bolts should be new or thicker to press the intake manifold better to the lower plastic part. After that, I get the short ones with equal or thinner grommets and install them. I never put the thicker grommets on the short bolts so that not to pull the bronze inserts out of the plastic part. By the way, it's not a great issue to fix the pulled out inserts if one knows how to do it, and if I pull them out one day in the future, I'll surely take a video about fixing this issue, and I'll give you a link to it here too. And the last but not the least step of today's repairs is to install the two 8mm bolts securing the manifold to the engine head brackets. The first bolt is situated between the engine and the firewall, and the other one right under the throttle body. Surely I install them both and tighten with a 10mm L wrench. This is my way how to get rid of the intake manifold vacuum leaks, and I'll be glad if you find this video helpful.